We are back. Lettermen Live, presented by Wendy's. You've had Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? We're not done just because the season's done. Wendy's new saucy nugs take a crispy and spicy nugs you love. They turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors: buffalo, honey barbecue, garlic parm, or the real heat seekers, the ball knowers. They run the football and they try the spicy ghost pepper only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. I dare you to try them. That's 11 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, Tim, it's got to be Wendy's to participate in U.S. Wendy's.
I got to try that ghost pepper just to say I tried it. I'm a fan of pretty much the other ones. I don't, but as I told you, I prefer to dip my nugs, not lick my fingers.
Well, Tim, that's why we say grab some extra napkins.
I love Wendy's nugs, though, my man.
That's why we say grab some extra napkins and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. That, of course, is the 41-year vet Tim May. I am just Spencer Holbrook. We are still talking in the aftermath of Ohio State's national championship victory over the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, 34-23 on Monday night. It is Thursday as we record this, Friday as it's going to be released to the wild. Of course, you guys already know Tim. If you didn't watch Tim's perspective in our Wednesday video about which of the championships was the best of the three in the 21st century, about where does this put Ryan Day in historical purposes, or if you didn't watch the chopped up version of those videos that I'm going to release here in the next couple days in 10-minute segments, just because they were worth their own videos on their own, please go back and watch that. You will be a better informed Ohio State fan.
And watch, Tim, I know, and watch my Tim May show, which is coming out.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Tim, we're still talking about this championship. I just had to, and I say had to, not because it was a chore to do. I love talking football. It doesn't matter what it is. I just had to write up the way too early depth chart for the 2025 season. I'm not going to talk about that right now. We're going to have a lot of that coverage here coming next week. You're getting ready to go on a little mini weekend vacation. I'm really happy for you with that. But I wanted to get you in one last time on Lettermen Live presented by Wendy's. We're going to talk a little bit more about this championship run. And my first question to you, Tim, is what was your favorite moment, or the moment that will stick out the most, or the moment that caught your eye, or the moment that made you say, wow, or the moment that made you have to go to confessional and say what you said wasn't okay, whatever you want to categorize it as. What's that moment of the college football playoff run, the 4 games? And, obviously Third and Jeremiah has taken on its own little persona now in Ohio State history. You've got the Jack Sawyer play. You've got the first Jeremiah Smith touchdown that set the tone against Oregon. There's defensive plays galore that you could pick. What's the one moment that sticks out to you right now as I ask you that maybe will stick out forever in your mind in this Ohio State 4-game run?
You know what? There are way too many.
Yeah.
And I'm going to, just for conversational purposes, I thought the hump they had to get over, this team, to start the downhill slide to the national championship, was Oregon. And I thought the little toss right to Travion Henderson, Donovan Jackson comes around, puts a little seal block on the inside. I think it was a linebacker trying to scrape to the play. Other good blocks out on the edge and up the field to a certain extent. But when Travion Henderson, where we were sitting in the press box, the press boxes now are in the end zones up to a certain extent, but it was almost like he was running right at us for a brief instant. And I went, I think I even uttered it, he's going to go all the way. Mm-hmm. And what was that, a 66-yard run, the longest run ever by a Buckeye in the Rose Bowl. But that was just, obviously the way they started that game with the first couple of touchdowns. The Egbuka catch was incredible. Jeremiah Smith catch and run was incredible. But when Travion went 66 yards, I went, oh, my goodness, this team has really got it going on. Because as we know at that point, Oregon was I was going to try to think of a passing gas reference. It doesn't use the usual words for that. Anyway, was in the wind. offensively because of their Ohio State defense. And with Travion, it was literally, wow, from there on, it was just a matter of getting to the finish of the game because it was such an opposite game of Ohio State at Oregon, 32-31 back on October the 12th. I'm going to remember that play just because all kinds of reasons, but Travion finishing it off where he didn't finish off that long run against Oregon at Oregon, but just, hey, the Tennessee game made sense because it was at home. It was frigid temperatures. They got it done emphatically against Tennessee, which I think you and I both agreed Ohio State was a much better team than going into and definitely coming out. But Oregon was undefeated, number one in the country, number one seed in the college football playoff championship, and 13-0. And that run right there told you everything you need to know about the redemption tour that the Buckeyes were on. Final answer.
That's a really good answer, Tim. And I thought that you could have went really anywhere with that. That made it 31.
There's 5 plays in the last 2 games alone.
Yeah, that's the play that made it 31-0. And at 24-0 in the Rose Bowl, it was 24-0 with 10 minutes to go in the second quarter. I mean, that's how much of a flash this Ohio State team, had there in that first 20 minutes of the game. But at 24-0 with 40 minutes still to play in the game, Oregon gets a stop, they get a score, then they go into the half and it's 24-7. They come out with the ball to start the second half. It's 24-14. Then you think maybe one more stop and one more score makes it a 3-point game or whatever, or a 7-point game, depending on a field goal or a touchdown. That could have become a game. And Oregon really did push to try to make it a game. But going from down 24 with 40 minutes to go to going down 31, not even 2 minutes after they made it 24-0, Travion scoots 66 yards, like you said, to make it 31-0. That officially put the game away. There is coming back from 24-0. We've seen that in college football before. Not typically, and not with a snowball team like this Ohio State team is, with the defense that they had. But it's possible.
Yep.
31-0 becomes historic in all the wrong ways if you blow that lead. It's almost impossible to blow that lead. The only one I can really think of is that Texas A&M UCLA game that opened the season with Josh Rosen. And then the TCU Oregon Alamo Bowl, where Gary Patterson changed his shirt at halftime and they came back from, I think, 34-0 down or whatever and won the game. You don't come back from 31 down. It's even with 40 minutes to play. And I think that's a perfect call. I wasn't expecting you to say that, but Trey's touchdown there changed the entire complexion of that game, because really the final 38 minutes of that game were just a celebration for Ohio State.
Right.
And Oregon scored.
And it was a run. It was a crushing run.
Yeah, I mean, it was some FU ball going on by Ohio State. Like, hey, we've had 3 different touchdowns of more than 40 yards through the air. We can also run. You're lightening the box to take away this passing attack that Ohio State had going so well. And Chip Kelly said, run the damn ball. And they ran the ball to perfection. I really like that answer, because that's when we officially knew that, and we had already seen Texas beat Arizona State in the press box that day. That's when we officially knew, like, this team's going to the semifinal, and they are now, like, emphatically the favorite to win the national championship from this moment forward. Yep. And, I just think that's a great answer, man. I give you a lot of credit, because I didn't think of that one. I didn't think that was going to be your. Mine is actually, oddly enough, and maybe we'll get killed in the comments for not having Jack Sawyer's scoop and score as the biggest play.
No, you just asked me for the one where, dude, there were huge plays throughout this whole run. I mean, Quinshon Judkins going 70 on what, the second play? Was it second play of the second half? Against Notre Dame? That was huge. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right on down the line. But this one, I just thought when it came and who it came against, you gotta, as you're exercising demons, you want to get the first one out of the way as quickly as possible, and they did that.
Mine is actually the touchdown before that, Tim. Less than 2 minutes later, less than 2 minutes before. So Travion Henderson's 66-yard run comes with 8 minutes and 47 seconds left in the second quarter to make it 31-0. Jeremiah Smith had a 43-yard wide open, and I mean WTFO, wide TF open.
Yeah.
To make it 24-0 on a 43-yard dime from Will Howard, where he was as open as you will ever see the best receiver in college football. It gets no more open than that. And I think in that moment, I realized that this team very well should win the national championship, because if Chip Kelly and Ryan Day are dialing up things that get Jeremiah Smith wide open, it's over. It's absolutely over. And maybe that's a little hindsight, because now I can couple that. Oregon lost him in coverage, and then 2 weeks later, or 2.5 or 3 weeks later, Notre Dame loses him in coverage to steal the national championship game. But Oregon did a good job defending Ohio State in the first matchup relative to what you can do against Ohio State. And in that moment where Will Howard found Jeremiah Smith on that crossing route wide open for his second touchdown of the game, a 43-yard touchdown pass, I think I even said to you, and whoever else I was sitting next to in the press box, I think it was Dayton Daily News' Marcus Hartman, I said, Chip Kelly has these guys in hell. Like the Jeremiah thing on the first touchdown with 14 minutes to go in the first quarter was like, hey, he got loose and made two guys miss and scored from 40 yards out, and that it's 7-0 Ohio State, and the band plays. Like, that's fine. Yeah. Emeka Egbuka's was just a great throw, and there's nothing really any defender can do. But when Jeremiah gets that wide open, it's like, if Chip Kelly has Oregon's talent and skill level in hell like this, Texas isn't defending these guys, and I know Notre Dame's not defending them.
Yeah.
And that's what played out. And so I think that is the touchdown or the score where I was like, okay, they really are onto something. It's not just that Tennessee was pressing them and challenging them and they got the best of those Tennessee corners. It's like there's not a corner in the country that's going to defend these guys, because even when you think you're locking them up, Chip Kelly's going to find a way to get them open.
Hey, by the way, I want to clarify with people something too. Ohio State came back from 24-0 down against Illinois in 1984. That was the Keith Byers 5-touchdown comeback, including 67-yard touchdown run, missing a shoe. And then Ohio State came back from 31-0 down at Minnesota in the old Metrodome with Greg Fry just throwing the hell out of the football, wearing that visor, that dark visor, and throwing the hell out of the football. Came back and won like 41-38 or 41-35. But, comebacks like you're talking about are rare. They have happened, but you're right. Against a really good defense like Ohio State had, there wasn't any sense that Notre Dame was ever going to come all the way back, for example, in the championship game. And even Texas, tied it twice, but couldn't get it done. So, I'm just clarifying that for folks who were wondering about largest. I think the 31-0 at that moment was the largest comeback in major college football history by Ohio State in 1989.
The other thing about the touchdown by Jeremiah Smith that made it 24-0, it was at that very moment that I bought my flight to Dallas because I knew that Oregon wasn't coming back. So I was in Pasadena in the press box of the Rose Bowl, and I just went ahead and hit confirm on that flight to Dallas because I was like, yeah, this game's over. And there's 10 minutes.
I'd already bought mine because I fly Southwest anytime I can, and I knew it was I could use the credit later on in deep retirement or something. So,
well, there you go.
Right.
But
that was the moment. That was the moment to press go on your airline ticket.
Good move by you. It's crazy. 10 minutes to go in the second quarter against the number one team in the country. You're already moving on to the next round. Like, pretty remarkable stuff there.
Yep.
Here, I'll go to this next question, Tim. And I'm not just here to facilitate questions to you. This is a discussion. It's meant to be a discussion, but I thought that, and maybe this isn't even a question, more than just a thought. I thought that it was critical for Ohio State in the entirety of this national championship run to have the upper hand in every game it played. There was never, ever a point, even when, and I know it's hard to come to terms with this, even when Notre Dame had an 18-play, 75-yard drive to open the game and goes up 7-0 only because it had the ball first. Even in that moment, Ohio State had the upper hand because its offense hadn't even touched the turf yet.
Yeah.
And they got the ball.
By the way, I think folks know this by now, but that was the only time Ohio State trailed in the playoffs.
That's the point I'm going to get to here, Tim, is that they got the ball first against Tennessee, and they went down and scored lightning quick. Will Howard to Jeremiah Smith from many yards out, and it was really impressive. I'm trying to pull it up as we go on here.
Clickety-clack, they went.
Yeah, I mean, their opening drives in this playoff run, were absolutely clinical. 37-yard pass from Will Howard to Jeremiah Smith with 12:46 left against Tennessee to open the game. Against Oregon, they get the ball first, and they go 75 yards in 3 plays, and Jeremiah Smith scores from 45 yards out. The Texas game, they stopped Texas to start the game on a 4th down, so their defense was on the field first because they won the toss, and they deferred to the second half.
Yep.
And Quinshon Judkins goes 9 yards with 7:24 left to go up 7-0. So there was only a half of a quarter there where Ohio State didn't have truly the upper hand, but they did set the tone in that game and had the upper hand. Yep. And then the Notre Dame game, even when Notre Dame goes on that magical drive, Ohio State converted 2 third downs on that next drive, and they went down clickety-clack right down the track, as you love to say, scored a touchdown to make it 7-7, and immediately regained the upper hand. There was never a moment in this playoff where I thought Ohio State was, on the ropes, if you will, because even in the Texas game, Texas tied it at 7. Texas tied it at 14. They tied it at 21, and then they got down. No, they tied it at 14, and then they got down to the goal line trying to tie it at 21. But you think like, okay, somebody on this defense is going to make a play, and they did. So they always had an opportunity, even if there was some adversity, to respond to it. And I think that's important to remember is like in the Michigan game, really at no point did they have the upper hand because Michigan dictated terms. In the Oregon game, they had the upper hand twice and turned the ball over basically on both of the drives where they were up 7. But in these triumphs of the final 4 games of the season, the final 6 weeks of the season, they just kept the upper hand. And when you hold that card, it's a hell of a trump card to have, to lay down at any moment and say, no, you are not coming back in this game because we've got that upper hand. We've got the better hand than you.
Yeah. I thought, my sense was they had the upper hand, or at least they had, I don't know how to explain it. I thought they grabbed momentum at the end of the first half against Michigan when they drove down and tied the score at 10 with that throwing the ball touchdown drive, which they should have been doing all day long, and tied it. I thought they gained the momentum there, but then never could get it. I mean, Michigan only had to go, 2 yards for its only touchdown after that interception. And the fact was, Ohio State got shut out in the second half of that game. Just when you thought it had figured things out offensively, it got shut out. There were things that contributed to the shutout. But you're right. I mean, the sense of destiny is the best way of putting it, I think. And the sense of the power that they had, that they showed on both sides of the field, on both sides of the ball throughout the playoffs, the 4 games of the playoffs, was palpable. I mean, it was a different team than we saw against Michigan on both sides of the ball. And I know they played a great defensive game against Michigan, but they did give up the winning field goal drive, and that was that. So I'm with you on that. I mean, it's there was a sense of purpose by the entire team throughout the playoffs, and I think it carried all the way through to the end.
Well, and I think that's what Ohio State fans were so angry about is if you would have lost to Michigan in, crazy fashion, I guess there's something to that, but you let them dictate the terms. And I think that's my entire point is like that players meeting, whatever was said in that with Ryan Day and Ryan Day's decision with Chip Kelly to become more aggressive. They didn't say, hey, we're going to be more aggressive. They're going to say, hey, we're going to play our brand of football and you have to match it.
Yeah.
And they did that against Tennessee right from the jump, throwing the ball all around the field. and getting it to Jeremiah on that deep ball, which we didn't see Will Howard do. And in the 3 weeks between the Michigan game and the Tennessee game, he must have done something crazy with his footwork, because Ryan Day always talks about how good he is. I think Ryan Day's exact quote after the national championship game is, when his feet are right, he's as good as any I've been around. Well, look at all those deep ball touchdowns of Jeremiah in the playoff, like his feet were right. And so
that was an answer to my question on how much he had improved himself in terms of what NFL scouts will now be looking at, because that was one of Will Howard's purposes or reasons for showing up at Ohio State. And that, as I keep pointing out to people, that was what he showed up before Chip Kelly did. So he was buying into the Ohio State, making him a better quarterback thing well before Chip Kelly showed up. So you're right, man. I mean, it's we saw him. You agree with this, don't you? He was so much better a quarterback the last 4 games of the season of the playoff, especially, right? I mean, he was a different guy compared to those first several games as a Buckeye.
No, I agree. We actually have Tim. I was looking back through a lot of Will Howard stuff here the last couple of days. We have quotes from Will Howard in January when he did like his introductory press conference out on the field at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, talking about how excited he was to play for Coach O'Brien.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of funny the way that everything worked out. Bill O'Brien, of course, goes to Boston College and
Bill O'Brien had been a several years head coach in the National Football League, and it worked for Bill Belichick, and it worked for Nick Saban. I mean, that was going to be a nice clinic. It turns into the Chip Kelly clinic, who has a very similar resume. So,
but it's
worked out really good for Will Howard, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, Tim, because like this is, again, folks, with these kind of shows with Tim, I don't even script anything because we just veer around wherever we go to. So I guess we'll take it here as like, I thought Will became a better quarterback when they stopped throwing or started throwing caution into the wind. Is that the saying? Like when I
don't know if caution, no.
But hear me out. Hear me out.
Okay.
Hear me out here. They dictated pace so much this season to make sure that they were getting to a 16-game season. They wanted to win the national championship. They wanted everybody to be fast, fresh, physical, and healthy. When they got to the national championship game, obviously that worked out really well. Quinshon and Travion looked as good on January 20th as they did on August 31st against Akron. It's remarkable the way that those guys looked at the end of the season compared to a lot of other backs who had taken some beatings.
Yes.
My point here is, when they were huddling all the time and slowing down the pace, and they were forced to be as efficient as you possibly can be against the best teams on the schedule, they didn't lose to Oregon. They ran out of time against Oregon. Why? Because they weren't efficient given the pace that they were playing with. They weren't efficient enough against that kind of team. Against Michigan, they were the least efficient you will ever see a Ryan Day coached offense.
Yes.
Once they started using tempo, I just think back to the first drive of the Tennessee game. We saw tempo. And Will Howard was perfect on that drive. Why? Because he was getting into a rhythm. He wasn't thinking through every single little thing for 40 seconds with his play clock every single play. He was great because they were running up tempo. No, you can't run tempo for 16 straight games and expect to be fast, fresh, physical, and healthy at the end of the year. But in the 4 games that they absolutely needed it, when Ryan Day decided, hey, it's time to take the training wheels off this thing, the pacing is done, it's win or go home no matter what, like, this offense looked so much better using tempo. And I know, again, you can't do that for 16 games. But, man, if you could, this offense would have been ridiculous because Tennessee had no answer for the tempo and how good Will Howard looked within the tempo. Oregon had no answer for the tempo and how he looked against it. Texas had answers, but Ohio State found answers to return to that, even, getting some tempo involved there. And then Notre Dame, when Ohio State went tempo there in the first half, they absolutely cooked Notre Dame. And when they slowed it down, the offense slowed down and struggled a little bit because it forces you to be more efficient. So that's where I saw the biggest jump in Will Howard is like Ryan Day let him run the up-tempo stuff and let him chuck it around a little bit, and he was great.
Yeah, by the way, put the word fit in there, fast, fresh, physical, and fit instead of healthy. Okay. Then you get the alliteration. Fast, fresh, physical, and fit. I like that. I was rewriting you even as you were talking. Dude, think about this. Will Howard played every meaningful play for Ohio State as the quarterback except one. And I'm not talking about the play he missed when he had to come out against Michigan and he went right back in there. I'm talking about the touchdown pass that Devin Brown threw to Jeremiah Smith down the right sideline. That bullet, he came off the bench, fired his bullet, and like Barney Fife, and left. He had one bullet and he fired it and hit the bullseye. And great catch by Jeremiah Smith too. But think about that. Your starting quarterback played almost every significant play of a 16-game season. That's ridiculous. And that just showed you what else fast, fresh, physical, and fit Will Howard brought to the program. Man, he was there when you needed him. He learned. He played his way through some things. I think we saw that too. We saw him become much more physical and much more in tune with this offense. And what really stood out in the playoffs, this is what you're talking about. He and Chip Kelly reached a synergy there, reached a symbiosis there that I don't think they had at certain times in the season. Didn't have it really in that win at Northwestern. I mean, that was a disjointed offensive performance at Northwestern, a come-from-behind win, And it kind of reminded you of the Notre Dame game because Northwestern just leaned on its quarterback who played his rear end off on that first possession, running the ball, remember? And and they got there and they took the lead on Ohio State at Wrigley Field. Well, that's what Notre Dame did. Notre Dame's weaponry after its first touchdown until it finally got its act going a little bit in the throwing game in the second half, but it was all on the quarter. It was quarterback or nothing. And same thing with Northwestern. The Ohio State defense got after him. But yeah, Will Howard, we saw him grow immensely from first game to last game. But definitely in the playoff against the better teams, he was the best quarterback on the field four straight games, and that included Dylan Gabriel, the Heisman Trophy runner or third place, Quinn Ewers, the guy everybody was still weeping about who left Ohio State, and then Lincoln Riley,
Riley Leonard.
Riley Leonard. I'm not kidding you. I've called him Lincoln Riley on radio shows and stuff, but Riley Leonard definitely. Will was the better of those two transfer quarterbacks. So it was fun to watch. And plus, you got to cover him, right, to really appreciate him. One of the great breaths of fresh air just from an interview situation, from an always smiling situation, from an upbeat, like Justin Fry, the offensive line coach, said when wrote a story about this when Seth McLaughlin went down, it was Will Howard who stepped in immediately and lifted everyone's spirits, especially along the offensive line, said, we're going to get through this from that practice, in the middle of that practice. And lo and behold, I mean, you saw a leader. He was already a leader, but you just saw a stud quarterback emerge.
Well, Tim, here's the other quote that I think is important to get to. Ryan Day, again, answering your question about Will in the NFL, but I think it pertains to a large part of what needs to be told with the story of Will Howard at Ohio State. Here's the quote. It's from Ryan Day. So, quote, I think the thing that nobody is probably going to understand how much credit he deserves is how much he can take on. To say 90% of the calls that went in the other day had 2 or 3 plays into it. He's calling a play or 2 in the huddle and then checking the play at the line of scrimmage. That's NFL material there. That's special. Now, I'm not launching into an NFL Will Howard conversation. I'm not Mel Kiper Jr. I'm not any of those draft nicks. I'm not trying to be, and I don't want to be. Will Howard can play in the NFL, though.
You just know what you saw. You know what you saw.
My eyes saw a guy who elevated. You know what? I'll just say this. I like listening to college football podcasts. There's a podcast called Cover 3. A lot of people listen to it. It's from CBS Sports. They do a great job.
Yep.
They like to call quarterbacks trucks or trailers. Are you the guy that's driving the truck or are you the trailer that's getting pulled behind your team?
Pulled behind the team, yeah.
So, and a lot of times I heard those guys, and again, I like those guys. I've talked to those guys before, refer to Will Howard as a trailer. And there were times in the regular season, Tim, where I think that was valid of Will Howard, where he was making a throw that Jeremiah Smith had to stutter step forward down the field, and Jeremiah would make the catch. But it was like, well, if Will leads him there, that's a touchdown. And then they have to worry about the red zone. There were times where, I thought Will would take a sack that maybe he should have thrown it away, where Ryan Day would have said, like, oh, my favorite play of the game was when Will Howard threw it away, like he used to do with Justin Fields.
Yeah.
Remember that? There were times where I thought Will missed a read on a read option and almost held the offense back in a way and got him to 2nd and 9 instead of 2nd and 1 because of a read. And Will, if you're listening, I think you were fantastic all year. But there were just times where it's like, okay, I think you could make the justification that the trailer is more apt of a description than the truck. In this college football playoff, the man became an F-350. He could haul anything. Like, he was incredible.
Did he have that 7.3 liter turbo diesel in it? The engine that Ford did away with in 2005 or whatever it was, that they should have kept running forever because that engine runs forever. Did he have that engine?
I think it's more of a 6.8. It's still hauling everything, but it's still pretty damn good truck, but it's not 7.3, Tim. I would say CJ Stroud was like the 7.3. Just because he's the number 2 overall pick and he won a playoff game this year. You know what I mean? But anyway, we'll get off of that analogy. It's just like,
by the way, while they're on that analogy, I don't know if I agree with the truck trailer, but I think he was definitely the truck at the end of the year. But I thought he was more the coupling, that little saddle coupling between the truck and the trailer for a while.
This is why I don't go to analogies with Tim, folks, because he takes them and just runs with them.
Well, yeah. Sorry.
The thing I run away with, Tim, are Wendy's saucy nugs, because when I order them, people chase me around and want them. Because you've had Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce, but getting them covered in sauce is so much better. Wendy's saucy nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them up, of course, to 11. You already know that. Choose the flavors: buffalo, honey barbecue, garlic parm, the whole kit and caboodle. You know the flavors by now. You've been listening to Lettermen Row all year. Or the heat seekers, the ball knowers, they try the spicy ghost pepper on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and nug like you've never nugged before. Nug your little heart out, Tim.
Remember
participating,
I used to be the nug when somebody would give you a nug.
Yeah.
Now it's Wendy's.
At participating U.S. Wendy's.
Nuggets.
All right, Tim. I'm going to make you give one, too. I got a hot take about this entire Ohio State college football playoff run. You're going to have to come up with one on your own. Again, we didn't script this. So you have no clue how to do this. But I've got a Wendy's saucy take for you. I think Tyleik Williams, because we just talked about offense for so long. My hot take here is that Tyleik Williams was the most underrated player of the 4-game CFP run. And there's a lot of players that you can point to as underrated. I think Donovan Jackson, even though he's gotten all this praise, has been underrated for what he did.
Well, how many times can you say he's playing great at left tackle? You know what I mean? It doesn't have as much pizzazz as Jeremiah Smith making a one-handed catch at the goal line,
But truly astonishing stuff that Donovan did. I think you could talk about Carnell Tate and what he did against Texas is truly one of the underappreciated stars of this 4-game run.
Yes.
There's so many guys you can highlight. Flip on the tape of Tyleik against Texas.
Yep.
It is unbelievable. Kelvin Banks is going to be a top 10 NFL draft pick at tackle. And there were a couple different plays where Tyleik didn't even make the tackle. But he was in pursuit as somebody else was coming up to make the tackle because they were so gap sound.
Yep.
And Kelvin Banks got in his way, and Tyleik Williams treated him like a Raggedy Ann doll. Like, just threw him to the side and got to the play. And, Tyleik had that ankle injury against Penn State. I think you probably would have seen that edition of Tyleik throughout November if he was on a better wheel. But man, from December 21st in the 8 p.m. slot on ESPN against Tennessee to January 20th in the 7:30 slot on ESPN against Notre Dame, that guy was as primetime as it gets. Yep. He was so good at run stopping. He was in on that sack of Riley Leonard, the pivotal sack of Riley Leonard there in the first half with Sonny Styles. He was in on a couple of plays against Quinn Ewers where I thought that if he wasn't there, maybe Quinn's able to deliver a throw. There were times where Tyleek was impacting the game that are no longer on the stat sheet, where when you turn on this 4-game run, if they even release DVDs anymore, when they release the commemorative DVD with all 4 full games, you're going to look in 25 years and watch that again and be like, oh my gosh, that guy had a good NFL career, but look at what he did to this 10-time Pro Bowl left tackle, Kelvin Banks, just throwing him around. Like, he was so good in the playoff, and we never talked about it because he would have 4 tackles against Oregon and then 6 tackles against Texas and, a couple of pressures, but he never, got to the quarterback in the way that got him a full sack. But, like, man, was he good all postseason. So I think the most underrated player of this entire run was Tyleek, and that's my spicy, or I guess my saucy take, presented by Wendy's.
Yeah, if there's anybody more underrated from that run, it's his buddy Ty Hamilton, because they controlled pretty much the middle of the field for 4 straight games. Heck, even against Michigan, they controlled the middle of the field. I mean, but going back to Tyleek Williams, I remember getting on media day there in Atlanta, 2 days before the game, and they had the whole teams in, and they had him up on a podium. I was the only guy asking him questions for the first 5 or 7 minutes, because I tried to talk to Tyleek Williams before every game if I could during that run, because I knew the significance of him. Did I write a story about him every time? No. Did I talk about him a lot on the radio, all the radio shows I did and some of the TV I did with Channel 10? Yes, because you're not going anywhere. Look at Georgia with and without Jalen Carter. Now, is Tyleek that measure of player? I don't know. We'll see down through the years, but he was pretty damn good. And then he played that role for Ohio State. I'm talking about Jalen Carter in Georgia 3 years ago. You don't win national championships without having a couple of guys down in the pit. There's the line of scrimmage, and then there's the pit in the line of scrimmage, kind of like when you go get your oil change. The guys who are really doing most of the work, the guys who do the dirty work, are the guys down in the pit. And Ty Hamilton and Tyleek Williams did the dirty work for this defense, and still managed to get a little showtime, for want of another term. But yes, I agree with you 100%. Was I supposed to come up with my own guy? I think I did, because I threw Ty Hamilton into the mix. The 2 ties, TNT.
Yeah, I mean, the only other guy that I could think of for this would be Jordan Hancock, because I think he played the best game of his college football career against Texas. I watched back through that game 2 or 3 times, and I thought that he was absolutely fantastic. So much so that when we started breaking down the national championship game, we talked to the coordinators. I asked Jim Knowles about Jordan's performance against Texas, and he said, quote, "I'm glad you saw that too," which told me, first of all, maybe there is a world where I do know ball. And second of all, there was a sense of like, my eyes didn't deceive me. I thought Jordan Hancock was incredible. When he was not a part of the play, there was a reason for that, because he was so tight in coverage. When he was a part of the play, he was making his presence known because he's a physical, violent, downhill player against the run, despite being smaller in his size, which is why I argued against the Arvell Reese thing all year, and not because I thought Arvell was bad, but because I thought, well, your defense is not really losing anything by having Jordan out there against in-run support, even though he's smaller. Like, it was nothing against the 3 linebacker look. It was just like, hey, what are you taking Jordan Hancock off the field for? He's one of the 7 best players on this defense. He didn't get as many interceptions this year. He didn't have a pick 6 this year like he did last year in the Rutgers game in 2023. He didn't have the flashy plays that maybe he made in 2023. But there's a reason for that, because he was so good in the slot that teams stopped throwing his way.
Yep.
And I thought that it was just.
But he wasn't just a slot though. See, I mean, he allowed. If you go back and watch video and just watch the games, he allowed Jim Knowles to play games with his other. Because I mean, Jordan Hancock was as much a safety as he was a nickel back the last part of this season, and he, especially after the loss at Oregon, that was one of the big changes. It allowed Jim Knowles to activate not just Caleb Downs, but also Lathan Ransom. I mean, they had the 2 best safeties in the country the last half of the season, just like they had the best linebacker in the country in Cody Simon, definitely the last half of the season. But Jordan Hancock, they could post him up over the top, which they did many times, is that top over the top safety, not leaving hardly ever. I can't remember how many times they went to zero cover in the last half of the season, but it was maybe a handful of times. The rest of the time, they played games with their other two safeties and played safely with a guy like Jordan Hancock, a very sure tackler over the top of the defense, and in a lot of, and they interspersed all that. But that was a luxury for a defensive coordinator to have three guys of that magnitude who you could play games with from the safety spots.
No,
other than that, I have no opinion.
Yeah, he made it much easier on Jim Knowles, and in some ways more complicated for Jim Knowles, because the ability to move Caleb Downs down to that middle linebacker rover weird position,
yes,
that maybe Caleb's not going to be able to play as next year. The ability for him to move Caleb, or to move Jordan back deep with Lathan Ransom, and Lathan Ransom to be so stellar in run support and run the alley like he did, was because of Jordan's versatility and ability to flex back into the middle of the field and be that field general. That's, I guess, and we're going just guy by guy here, but it's almost fair.
Yeah, no, you can't leave anybody out, brother. This was as good a defense as Ohio State has put on the field. I'm talking about the second half of the season. As Ohio State's put on the field since at least, I know, everybody goes back to 2019. I go back farther than that. I mean, I go back to maybe 14 when they really got their act together in the second half of that year. And 15, that was a damn good defense with great players across the board. And, Matt Wilhelm and I talk about this all the time. That 2002 defense is way underrated for how good it was the last half of the season. It's the reason I picked Ohio State to beat Miami in that championship game. If you go back and watch an old video from Channel 10, when I picked Ohio State to beat Miami, I said, and the main reason I'm picking them is because this defense has come of age. And, like I always say, defense does not win games for you, but it puts you in position to win games. This defense was that style of defense.
Well, and here's what I'll say, Tim. The 2019 defense had more star power. Chase Young, Jordan Fuller, who I thought is forever underrated in Ohio State history. Devon Hamilton was a star that year.
Whose brother is?
Yeah, Ty Hamilton. And then, and then Jeff Okudah on the outside. I think there is very much so more star power on that 2014 Ohio State defense than there is on this, or on the 2019 Ohio State defense than there is on this 2024 defense. Yeah. I think in 2014, Joey Bosa and however many corners they had that ended up, in the back part of that roster, who ended up years later being first-round picks, the star power was there as far as, like, this guy is a no-doubt top 5 pick. There's no questions about it. He doesn't even have to show up to the combine. Then this 2024 defense. I will make the case, though, that this 2024 defense is the best defense in the history of the program, because there are 8 guys who have to leave this program, and I believe all 8 of them will have their names called in April. There is a ninth that if he does leave, Davis Nigbenosin, which he's got to make a decision by Sunday, he will get drafted. There's a 10th, Tim, a 10th. Think about that, 10 guys. There's a 10th in Sonny Styles, where right now I would lean stay, but it wouldn't surprise me if he went after the playoff that he put together. Yep. If he goes, he will be drafted.
Well, he's got to. Here's the way. Make sure everybody understands, because there were times when Sonny Styles I thought could have been better, but for the most part he was damn good. But understand, at the combine, he's going to wow you. I mean,
that's correct. But what I'm saying here, Tim, is that's 10 guys immediately, without even going to the second part of the depth chart or the twos that will in 2 or 3 years get drafted. That if they all come out at the same time, that's 10 defenders that I think will get drafted this year.
Yeah.
Even a guy like Cody Simon, who for some reason his pro career, and maybe it's because of his size or whatever, the NFL is different. It really is, and it's weird. So, like, maybe he's like a late guy. Maybe Ty Hamilton isn't going to be a first 5 or 6 round pick, but he'll get drafted late because of the track record of Larry Johnson and guys in the NFL.
Yep.
All 10 of those guys have the chance to be drafted in the same draft. That would be remarkable. So, from a pro standpoint, yes, the 2024 defense is better top to bottom 1 to 11 than the 2015, the 2014, the 2019, and even the 2002, because the pros on this team, it's the depth of the pros, not just the high level of the pros. And I think that's what gives this 2024 unit the nod. And also, I think Caleb Downs is the best non-Chase Young singular player defensive-wise of the 21st century, and that even includes Mike Doss. There is something about Caleb Downs that is so, in my opinion, generational to the way he plays the safety position.
Yep.
That like makes this defense go from in line with 1914 and 02 and puts it above those. Like, he is insane.
Yeah. I mean, I want to make sure people understand the 1998 defense was exceptional, extraordinary.
Yeah, that's true.
The 1996 defense was extraordinary.
Yeah.
And people I know people, it's 50 years ago, but the 1973 Ohio State defense might have been the best defense in Ohio State history. I mean, the star power on that defense, but also the way they played, they giving up literally no points most of the year was crazy. I hope people understand that we're not just stuck in the 21st century when we talk about defenses, but you're exactly right. And, I had a guy inside the building there who knows football. I'm talking about inside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, tell me way back in August, man, there were two unicorns on this Ohio State football team. One of them was Jeremiah Smith, and he said, you're going to see as the season develops how good he is. We saw it from the get-go, but it was. And the other's Caleb Downs. Unicorns are rare sightings, that don't come around very often. And I think everybody understands what that fella meant by those two guys being unicorns. What remarkable players on a very remarkable team.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And what does separate this 14 or this 2024 unit from the 19 team that puts it with the 2014 team is that they get to slip a ring on their finger.
Yep.
And so it's 02, 14, 24, like in the 21st century. Those are the three standard bearers for these defenses.
Hey,
the 19 defense, as good as it was, didn't win a championship. And they say defense wins championships.
College football playoff, as much money as they made on all those 3-minute, 10-second TV timeouts the other night, for example, the college football playoff, they ought to do like the Indianapolis 500 does. You got the big trophy, the Borg Warner trophy. But when you're you're the owner, the driver, the crew chief, I think, but several others, but it ought to be for the whole team when it comes to college football. They ought to give you mini versions. They call them baby Borgs in IndyCar, but they ought to give you mini versions of that championship trophy because you were part of it, man. Those guys, those three tight ends they had down there when Quinshon Judkins got was that his second touchdown or third touchdown? Actually, they did it on two of his plays, maybe two of his touchdowns. But Patrick Gerd leading the way, from fullback, and then the other two tight ends and everybody else who was involved. And they played a huge role in a minor way. But the bottom line was everybody who played at least should get a mini version of the championship trophy.
Yeah, maybe that's something that you could float to Bill Hancock the next time you've got him on the show, Tim.
Yeah, well, he's retired now, but he's got those people.
He's got friends in low places or high places, depending on how you look at that playoff committee. You could say they're in low places or high places. I tend to think that the committee's in a low place, but that's just me. We talked about that in December.
I thought did a pretty good job.
No,
to be honest with you.
You got a plane to catch. I'm not letting you get onto a diatribe about the committee. Okay. That's not happening on this. That's not happening on this thing, Tim.
Yeah.
But you're exactly right, though, as you like to say when I make a point that you like. You're exactly right, Tim. Patrick Gerd from the transfer portal is still making plays for Ohio State. He's still bought in to this team. I thought Bennett Christian in the playoff took a step as a blocker that I wasn't sure he was going to take. I thought he was fantastic.
He looked like a man possessed on several plays. I'm going to pancake you unless the whistle blows.
Yeah, he and Will Kazmarek, who I thought was the other one,
Yeah.
from a blocking standpoint. And G obviously made plays in the passing game that I think deserve to be complimented, but he's not. He's a good blocker. Don't get
I
me
think G
wrong.
had a damn good year blocking.
Yeah,
Let me put it
no,
that
I
way.
do too. But overall, I think when you would rank these guys as blocking tight ends, now that the dust is settled, the confetti is settled. It's not dust; it's confetti.
Yeah.
You would probably rank them somewhere of Bennett or Will, then Bennett or Will, then G as far as blocking. Just basic level of blocking. But I thought G was really good. But all three of those tight ends plus Gerd. The only play that I can think of that I thought Gerd was missed on was one of the Will Howard quarterback powers where Gerd missed a block there right at the end of the game, but that also set up 3rd and Jeremiah. So maybe that was the point all along, was for Pat Gerd to miss that block. But anyway,
dude, we saw some plays. Dude, we saw some plays in the playoff. We saw some plays all year, but in the playoff, like you made me zero in on one, but there were so many just huge plays, both offensively and defensively. And that's what you have to have. You have to be extraordinary to win a national championship. And this team was extraordinary.
Yeah, just full circle on the show, and then we'll wrap it up. You named Trayvion's 66-yard touchdown run. I named Jeremiah's touchdown right before that. They happened 2 minutes apart from each other, almost in real time, 2 minutes too, because that Rose Bowl seemed to fly as Ohio State was scoring points. But there were 2 plays in the Texas game where I actually swore to you when that happened on the Trayvion run. I think I tapped you on the shoulder and I said, "Holy SH," when Trayvion got the screen pass against Texas.
And took Nikes, I think.
Because Texas's fans had the entire building rocking. Texas as a sideline had the building rocking. And then Trayvion completely just swiped that momentum right away from them to make it 14-7 at the half.
Yes.
And then the other one where I had nothing to say. I didn't say a word. I just had cold chills. And I will never, ever in my life, Tim, forget you looking over at me and you said, you almost hit me. It was like a boom, like hit me on the shoulder. And you said, "He's going to score." And I said, and I had nothing to say. I was out of words.
Yeah.
And those 2 moments obviously are the ones that I think Ohio State fans will forever remember, along with 3rd and Jeremiah. But I thought it was important to say, like, when's the moment you knew that this team could win a national championship? For you, it was that Trayvion 66-yard run. For me, it was the Jeremiah touchdown pass just prior. I think we covered a lot of ground here, Tim. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Because like you said, we could do a whole another hour and make it totally different from this one, naming plays. You understand what I'm saying?
Well,
because it's kind of like watching somebody stack, straw till the straw breaks a camel's back kind of thing. And that's what's great about this 4-game run. Number one, unprecedented 4-game run, twice as long as any before it from a playoff standpoint. And this team had the endurance. It had the roster. Like we talked about this all through June, July, August, heck, starting in March, about the roster that they had put together. But, will it run the length? And then you lose 3 really starting offensive linemen at one point. They shuffle the offensive line around. Are you kidding me? They had the best offensive line in the country at the end of the year. I don't care if anybody agrees with me or not. It definitely was. Notre Dame had one of the great defenses in the country, right? And Ohio State found a way. Texas had one of the great defenses in the country, and Ohio State found a way. We saw Oregon in its defense against Ohio State the first time around and stuff. I mean, and Tennessee was, flip side of that, Tennessee was supposed to have maybe the best defensive line as a collection in the Southeastern Conference. What did the Ohio Sait offensive line do to that group? I mean, wow. I'm writing a story with Orlando Pace. Maybe you can run it on Friday. I'm going to write it on the planes. I'm headed to Vegas, but just Orlando Pace talking about the offensive line and what a difference it made, because we talk about all these other plays, but that screen pass that you talked about, that run that I talked about, both by Trayvion, those were kaboom plays, and mainly because the offensive line held sway.
No, I completely agree, Tim. And you said that
I got excited,
but you said it had the endurance and the ability to go on this 4-game run.
Yeah.
I would throw one more word in there. It's the very last parting thought. Now, I'm going to get us out of here on this. I'm not even going to give you a last word, Tim, now.
All right.
I do got to get you on a plane.
I
got to get you on a plane to Vegas. This team also had the audacity to go on that run.
Yep. That's
everybody doubted this team and said, Ryan Day can't win the big one. This offense is broken. This offensive line isn't good enough. And they looked themselves in the mirror and said, yes, we are. We can do this. And they had the audacity to go out there and do it and to prove everybody, and I mean everybody, wrong. The most staunch Ryan Day supporters were even starting to look for the lifeboats at the edge of the Titanic. And it was almost like you don't want to use religious terms ever. It was almost like a resurrection of a career for Ryan Day because it was on the brink. From November 30th to December 20th, the thing was literally on the brink. And if the aggressive attitude that he brought to the playoff didn't work out and Tennessee was able to defend Ohio State, it might have reached a breaking point. And instead, they had the audacity to go on a run and beat 4 of the best 10 teams in college football on their way to the most, again, unprecedented national championship in college football history.
Yeah.
So,
and I hope people don't discount. I use that word about the 56-yard pass from Will Howard to Jeremiah Smith, 3rd and 11.
3rd and Jeremiah, Tim.
3rd and Jeremiah. I asked, Chip Kelly down the field. That was, would you call that a gutsy call? And he took a clinical approach to it. He didn't call it gutsy. He called it a play that they'd worked on. And if you get the look, you throw it, right? And but you know what that tells you? They've got confidence in that quarterback. They've got confidence in that wide receiver, and they've got confidence because you knew Notre Dame was coming after them on that play. I think Notre Dame rushed 6, if my count was right. And the offensive line gave Will Howard enough time to stand back there, make sure the read was correct, and it was right off the bat, it was correct, and then throw the ball and drop a dime on Jeremiah Smith, and that's audacity to its nth degree. I mean, it was the kind of play that we expected this incredibly talented Ohio State football team to show us 2 or 3 or 4 of every game, through the year. And in the final game, the moment of truth, they trusted their quarterback, they trusted their offensive line, they trusted their quarterback, and they trusted their receiver, their freshman receiver, to make the play. That encapsulates what this season was all about.
Yeah, I mean, that Ryan Day quote is going to live in history where, we want to be aggressive. We want to stay aggressive. And, so I said, hey, it's for the national championship. We might as well call it. I mean, that's audacity in itself, trusting everybody, trusting Travion Henderson to get over in the A-gap and pick up that blitzing linebacker who I thought played incredible, Drake Bowen.
Yep.
Pick him up. I mean, everything had to come together on that play. It was a culmination of a 4-game run that we'll never forget. Ryan Day said at the end of the Texas game that this team has a story to tell, but the winners get to tell the story. The problem is that there are so many of these stories to tell from this 4-game run that we just have to keep recording videos to tell them because there's not enough time in the world to write them all. It would be like the Library of Alexandria couldn't hold all these stories. So we're just going to keep talking about this national championship until we literally are told to shut up and move on to 2025. And maybe that's August 29th before they play Texas on the 30th. I don't know, but we'll keep talking about it because this was an incredible 4-game run to the College Football Playoff National Championship. Tim May, the 41-year vet. I'm just Spencer Holbert. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. It's the Lettermen Live presented by Wendy's. Go get those saucy nugs of participating U.S. Wendy's. We'll see you guys back here next week for another Lettermen Live presented by Wendy's. We're going to see Tim on the other side of his trip to Vegas. Maybe we'll get a scouting report on how that Eagles show was.
Yep.
For now.
3 days of golf.
There you go. Oh, man. Wow.
4.
I'm jealous.
I'm already warming up. 4.
But also, I get to go back to LettermenRow.com just with all these people and talk to them on the Lettermen Lounge. Message board, $1 for your first 7 days. Thanks for hanging out for 58 minutes and 30 seconds. We'll talk to you guys next week on another Lettermen Live presented by Wendy's, and we'll talk to you over at LettermenRow.com.